Progress and Poverty, page 67, which, bear with me, I have to scroll. It said 67, right? 60, is that 68? Okay, so, yeah, the last paragraph was talking about how, if you're cutting a canal or a tunnel or whatever, on the contrary, it probably and on average increases as the work progresses, just as capital invested in a speedier mode of production would on the average increase. And this is obvious in agriculture also, that the creation of value does not take place at all. No. And this is obvious in agriculture also, that the creation of value does not take place all at once when the crop is gathered, but step by step during the whole process which the gathering of the crop concludes, and that no payment of wages in the interim lessens the farmer's capital is tangible enough when land is sold or rented during the process of production, as a plowed field will bring more than an unplowed field, or a field that has been sown more than one merely plowed. It is tangible enough when growing crops are sold, as is sometimes done, or where the farmer does not harvest himself but lets a contract to the owner of harvesting machinery. It is tangible in the case of orchards and vineyards, which, though not yet in bearing, bring prices proportionate to their age. It is tangible in the case of horses, cattle, and sheep, which increase in value as they grow towards maturity. And if not always tangible between what may be called the usual exchange points in production, this increase of value is as surely takes place with every exertion of labor. Hence, where labor is rendered before wages are paid, the advance of capital is really made by labor, and is from the employed to the employer, not from the employer to the employed. Yet, it may be said, in such cases as we have been considering, capital is required. Certainly, I do not dispute that, but it is not required in order to make advances to labor. It is required for quite another purpose. What that purpose is, we may readily see. When wages are paid in kind, that is to say in wealth of the same species as the labor produces, as, for instance, if I hire men to cut wood, agreeing to give them as wages a portion of the wood they cut, a method sometimes adopted by the owners or lessees of woodland, it is evident that no capital is required for the payment of wages, nor yet when, for the sake of mutual convenience arising from the fact that a large quantity of wood can be more readily and more advantageously exchanged than a number of small quantities, I agree to pay wages in money instead of wood. Shall I need any capital, provided I can make the exchange of the wood for money before the wages are due? It is only, maybe I read that wrong. Let me try it again. Nor yet when, for the sake of mutual convenience arising from the fact that a large quantity of wood can be more readily and more advantageously exchanged than a number of small quantities, I agree to pay wages in money instead of wood. Shall I need any capital, provided I can make the exchange of the wood for money before the wages are due? It is, I don't know if that was a question, it just ends in periods, whatever. It is only when I cannot make such an exchange, or such an advantageous exchange as I desire, until I accumulate a large quantity of wood, that I shall need capital. Nor even then shall I need capital if I can make a partial or tentative exchange by borrowing on my wood. If I cannot, or do not choose either to sell the wood or to borrow upon it, and yet wish to go ahead accumulating a large stock of wood, I shall need capital. But manifestly, I need this capital not for the payment of wages, but for the accumulation of a stock of wood. Likewise, in cutting a tunnel, if the workmen were paid in tunnel, which, if convenient, might easily be done by paying them in stock of the company, no capital for the payment of wages would be required. It is only when the undertakers wish to accumulate capital in the shape of a tunnel that they will need capital. To recur to our first illustration, the broker to whom I sell my silver cannot carry on his business without capital, but he does not need this capital because he makes any advance of capital to me when he receives my silver and hands me gold. He needs it because the nature of the business requires the keeping of a certain amount of capital on hand, in order that when a customer comes, he may be prepared to make the exchange the customer desires. And so we shall find it in every branch of production. Capital has never to be set aside for the payment of wages when the produce of the labor for which the wages are paid is exchanged as soon as produced. It is only required when this produce is stored up, or what is to the individual the same thing, placed in the general current of exchanges without being at once drawn against, that is, sold on credit. But the capital thus required is not required for the payment of wages, nor for the advance to labor, as it is always represented in the produce of the labor. It is never an employer of labor that any producer needs capital. Let me start over. It is never as an employer of labor that any producer needs capital. When he does need capital, it is because he is not only an employer of labor, but a merchant or speculator in or an accumulator of the products of labor. This is generally the case with employers. To recapitulate, the man who works for himself gets his wages in the things he produces, as he produces them, and exchanges this value into another form whenever he sells the produce. The man who works for another for stipulated wages in money works under a contract of exchange. He also creates his wages as he renders his labor, but he does not get them except at stated times, in stated amounts, and in different form. In performing the labor, he is advancing in exchange. When he gets his wages, the exchange is complete. During the time he is earning the wages, he is advancing capital to his employer, but at no time, unless wages are paid before work is done, is the employer advancing capital to him. Whether the employer who receives this produce in exchange for the wages immediately re-exchanges it, or keeps it for a while, no more alters the character of the transaction than does the final disposition of the product made by the ultimate receiver, who may, perhaps, be in another quarter of the globe and at the end of a series of exchanges numbering hundreds. That's the end of that chapter. The next one's chapter 5, I think, but it is page 70.